What's up, everybody? It's Jordan, and welcome to the Sports 2 Hine Show. Today is September 15th, 2021, and on today's episode, I'm joined by Tony Gazza. How you doing today, Tony?
Doing good. How about yourself, Jordan?
Really, really good. Really glad you can join the show. We have a lot to talk about. Week one recap, a little bit talking about the Thursday night football game tomorrow night between the Washington football team and the Giants. Going to be talking about some rookie quarterback debuts. Your Packers, against the Saints the other day. Big E, really surprisingly, winning, cashing in the Money in the Bank and winning the title. Before we get kind of started, can you kind of tell some of the listeners, what you're podcasting about, what kind of topics you talk on there?
Absolutely. So my YouTube is Tony G TV, and I mostly do sports-related videos, but lately I've been branching out and going more into politics and etc. My sports Instagram is Tony Gazza TV, and my main is Antonio W Gazza on Instagram. So give me a follow, and I appreciate you for having me on.
Yeah, I absolutely. I actually saw your live last night on Instagram. You're doing a great job. Keep up the great work and everything. And as we get started here with our week one not predictions, but kind of review. This game was already about a week ago, which it just seems crazy that the NFL regular season has already almost been a weekend. But, this game to me was definitely one of the most intriguing games. Really surprised me. Obviously, the majority of people thought who was going to win this game. The Buccaneers. They did end up beating the Cowboys. But what are your kind of initial thoughts on this Cowboys and Buccaneers game and with the return of Dak Prescott?
Well, first off, Tampa Bay proved that they're the best team in the NFL going into this game. But Dak Prescott answered all the questions we've been asking him. Can he throw over 50 passes in a game? How's the ankle and shoulder going to hold up? Is he durable enough? And, he looked good. And overall, I was kind of disappointed in Ezekiel Elliott's performance, but you got to give credit where credit is due. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense is stout, and they stopped them. But Prescott looked impressive. 42 out of 58, 403 passing yards, 3 TDs, 1 pick. Brady had a very good game. Obviously, it's a quarterback-friendly system with Bruce Arians, but 32 out of 50, 380 passing yards, 4 TDs, 2 picks. Now, those 2 picks are uncharacteristic, but in my opinion, they both played great, and that's why the score was 31-29. And overall, I was impressed with both teams. I think Dallas is going to win their division, and I think that the Buccaneers can repeat a Super Bowl run.
And it's one of those games where, like I was saying, you kind of knew the outcome. You didn't know what to expect. I believe the spread of this game was 8 or something like that. Not many people really expected Dak Prescott to play good. I was one of those people because, you look at Prescott, that was a horrific injury. Some people did not want him playing week one, which to me, I kind of understand. He goes out there and it was just absolutely phenomenal. His only interception was a drop. I mean, his accurate passes were insane. He did go to the pocket and have a couple of short runs, which is something you really love to see if you're a Dallas fan because he's not afraid to maybe take a hit or, not afraid to use his legs after that injury and everything. And it's just crazy because to me, I think this shows more about Dallas than it does Tampa Bay because we already expected Tampa Bay, obviously, to be the front runners to win the Super Bowl this season. If not, they would be the second team. But the Cowboys, lots of people give them crap and, memes and stuff like that. They always hate on their fan base. But the Cowboys, to me, really show that they are one of the better teams, I would say, in the NFC. I would put them in that top 4 discussion in the NFC. They're clearly going to win their division. Not including Fitzpatrick getting hurt. I don't even think this was a competitive race in the NFC East to begin with, even if Fitzpatrick played all 17 games, which, obviously, he got hurt. We'll talk about that later. But this Cowboys team, and really even their defense, there was times their defense did mess up. Their defense last season to start off was historically bad. But this Dallas team is really going to be fun to watch. I wouldn't be surprised if they maybe had 10-plus wins this upcoming year.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it. And, it's unfortunate to see what happened to Ryan Fitzpatrick. I've always been a fan of his. I think he's a viable quarterback, veteran leadership that can come in. He could win you a game. And not only that, but I believe the backup is Taylor Heineke. So we're going to see how he does in place of Ryan Fitzpatrick. He's going to be out for 6 to 8 weeks, but that leaves the question open. And could you see a Ron Rivera and Cam Newton reunion in Washington? That's very possible, and I'm going to keep updated on that. But yeah, it's very unfortunate. I'm a big fan of the beard, so.
That'll kind of be our next topic here. With the Chargers, they actually defeated Washington 20-16. And to me, you said you're a big fan of Fitzpatrick. To me, I think he's an overhyped average quarterback. And I know lots of people talk about Fitz magic, and he'll throw for 300 some yards a game. That is true, but you also have to look at it at times. I feel like at least half those times where he's put in that situation, he put that team in that spot where they're trailing. He's very inconsistent. I feel like Ryan Fitzpatrick's easily one of the most inconsistent quarterbacks of all time. We'll see a game where he'll come in at halftime, and just in the second half, he'll throw for, let's say, 250 yards and a couple of touchdowns. But when he starts a game, that's when he'll struggle and have a couple of picks. And when he played against the Chargers, he was, he didn't really play a ton because he was injured. But when he played, I really didn't see anything great. Even with the Chargers, I was really excited to see Herbert. He's one of my dark horses for the MVP of this season. I have him on a couple of my fantasy teams. This Washington team, obviously, they have a fantastic defensive line, probably the best young defensive line in the league. But, Herbert kind of disappointed me in some of his, plays and, some of his passes, because I really expected this Chargers team to score more than 20 points against this Washington team, because the Chargers, they had the worst offensive line in the league last year, according to some people. And that's coming from a Bengals fan. I would put the Chargers offensive line last year right up there with the Bengals. They actually even had the worst PFF rating than the Bengals last season. But they brought in Slater, they brought in Lindsley with the Packers. We've talked about before, that was a terrific signing for Los Angeles. I really expected Herbert to play better. I'm not really surprised that the Chargers, ended this game with a win here. But I was kind of disappointed, honestly, in both of these teams.
Yeah, and I definitely see the future of the franchise in Justin Herbert. I love his game, and I think he's a very viable quarterback going forward. It's sad to see, legends from teams like Phillip Rivers and Tom Brady leave their franchises that they've been with forever. And, I'm kind of in that situation too. I've grown up with Aaron Rodgers in my, in my franchise. So to see him leave and, have Jordan Love taking snaps at starting quarterbacks doesn't feel right. And overall, I think the Chargers played under par. I don't think that they performed up to expectations. But then again, Washington has a good defense. And don't forget about Ron Rivera. He's a tremendous defensive-minded coach, and let alone the offensive-minded side. So I think overall, week one, you can't put too much into it. I mean, it's 16 more weeks to go. So I think it's still a little too early to solidify anything. But hey, they got the dub, and at the end of the day, that's all that matters. They don't show the score; they show the win column and loss column. So that's that.
And we mentioned the Fitzpatrick injury, and you mentioned Cam Newton. Do you think lots of people think maybe they should sign Cam Newton, or they maybe trade for somebody? Because Taylor Heineke, to me, you don't know what you're going to get, and that could be good, but that can be bad. Because he's only started one game with Washington, that was last year, and then nearly defeated the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Fitzpatrick, as of right now, is expected to miss 6 to 8 weeks with a hip injury. This is interesting because there's a part of me, if I'm Washington, I know I sound crazy, I would rather have Heineke as my quarterback than Fitzpatrick, because with Fitzpatrick, you kind of know what you're going to get. You're going to get super inconsistent, but at the same time with Heineke, you really haven't seen his full potential in the fact. He's only started one game. So you don't know what you're going to Heineke. You more so know what you're going to get from Fitzpatrick, but it's still it's wildly inconsistent. With Heineke, he has that potential we haven't seen yet. That one start with against Tampa Bay in the playoffs, if he plays like that, I would definitely rather have Heineke as my quarterback than Fitzpatrick. But if I'm Washington, you have to sign a guy like Cam Newton, because I think Heineke can go in at times and start games, but I still don't really trust Heineke in the fact that this Washington team can get 10+ wins. If I'm Washington, I'm definitely considering signing Cam Newton or one of these other veteran quarterbacks in the market as well.
Yeah, and I think you're right there. You see what you get from Taylor Heineke. Test the waters with him, and if he gets injured, God forbid, then you pick up the phone and call Cam Newton, because your quarterback room is real slim. So not to mention, I mean, he was with Ron Rivera for years, and they're familiar with each other. And I think Cam Newton is a great enough athlete where he can make up for some of the flaws in his game. I heard rumors that Mac Jones was teaching him the Patriots playbook. So, in that situation, Ron Rivera is going to run read option or, pass run option. So it's just one of those things that you have options with Cam Newton, run the RPO, get him outside the pocket, extend plays, if Taylor Heineke does not work out. And why wouldn't you just sign Cam Newton now? Just to have him on your roster. It wouldn't hurt. And like you said, Fitzpatrick is on IR. And, there's no other guy on the market that I would think they would go for other than Cam because the ties with Ron. I mean, people bring up Colin Kaepernick in every conversation, which he should be brought up in, but the potential of him getting signed is slim to none. So I think that Cam's the most viable option. But it's just tragic, man. These injuries are catching up because, week one, you're not expecting to play, 100 plus snaps. So your body's, not used to it. So a lot of cramps, a lot of nagging injuries that won't go away, especially guys who are coming in injured. Like a lot of guys get injured in camp or, so on and so forth. So we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, I definitely feel like Newton makes the most sense. Like that's the obvious choice. And the fact he's really struggled the past couple of years. But at the same time, I feel like, with this Washington defense, I feel like at times it can carry Newton. If he has a bad game or performance, it could still kind of make up for it with their, stout defense. They can, not give up many points and they come up with a victory. That makes a lot of sense. I would be more surprised if it didn't happen than if it did. Roman Vera, with the, connection with Newton, he's been together for like 9 years or so. So another game here, I was really, really, really surprised by this game. The Eagles defeating the Falcons 32-6. Heading into the year, I thought the Eagles were easily a top 3 worst team in the league. Hurts was phenomenal, and that's coming from somebody who does not like Jalen Hurts at all. I said in the offseason, I don't think Jalen Hurts, there's a chance, I don't think Jalen Hurts will be the starter by the end of the season. If he plays like he did Sunday, he's going to be phenomenal for them. 250 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, very impressive, turnover-free football. And you look at this Eagles team. This Eagles team gave up 65 sacks last season. They were just horrendous. And you look at the weapons that Hurts has compared to some of these other receivers. I was very, very impressed with Hurts in this game against Atlanta. Then you look at the Atlanta side. There's already people saying the Atlanta Falcons should have took a quarterback in number 4. I think that's a little bit, too early to tell, but I don't disagree with it in the fact I always thought Atlanta should have took a quarterback. It just did not really make sense to me much because you look at quarterbacks, they have that 5th-year option. If they were to get a quarterback in the second or third, they would only have, 4 years in the contract. If you are in a situation where you can pick a quarterback who can be great for you for 10, 15 years, go ahead and do it. You're not going to have a top 5 pick every single year. They had the 4th pick. And they took Kyle Pitts, who, in my opinion, was probably the best draft prospect in this year's draft. But a good quarterback outweighs any other good position in the NFL. You have to have a good quarterback or you're not going to succeed. Matt Ryan, he's 35 plus. He does not have many years left at all. This Atlanta team, I know it's early, but they are definitely in contention to possibly, having another top 5 pick in the NFL draft next year.
Yeah, and I wouldn't buy any stock into the Falcons, let alone the Eagles. I think it's fluke week 1. Obviously, the Eagles pounded the Falcons. What did you expect from the Falcons? Matty Ice is a middle-of-the-road, 35-year-old quarterback. I understand the awards, but that's great and all. But with the eye test, he's not Aaron Rodgers. He's not Tom Brady. He's not Russell Wilson. I know what you're going to get in Matty Ice. He's viable for the next couple of years to service the Falcons, but after that, they need to find his replacement. Julio Jones wanted out, and Shannon Sharp released it on live television, and he got his way out to Tennessee. And that says a lot. When your number 1 receiver wants out, most of the times it's because of your quarterback. You don't see Devontae Adams wanting out because of Aaron Rodgers. You don't see it. And I think that going into week 2, that the Eagles will go back to their old ways, and Falcons are going to continue on this downward spiral.
And that is interesting because you talk about the Eagles going back to their old ways. For instance, look at the Jaguars last season. They won their first game of the year. They lost 15 straight and had the first pick of the draft. So, that is possible. We could definitely see that happen. There was a couple other games I was just really surprised by. Some of these sucky teams having really close games against good teams, or these sucky teams even winning some games I did not think would even be close. And one game that really surprised me, if I had to pick an upset of the week, unfortunately, it would probably have to be this one, and it really pains me to say as a Bengals fan. The Steelers beating the Bills. I did not think this game was going to be close at all. That block punt return for a touchdown, ended up being huge for them because if not, this could have been a 16-16 situation. You don't know the rest of the outcome. They did not make Josh Allen like he looked like he was last year. This was not the Josh Allen we saw last year. I know it's early. Obviously, he's going to get better. But this was just a tremendous performance from this Pittsburgh Steelers defense. Obviously, they did not run the ball very well with Najee Harris. That's not surprising at all, considering they have 4 new starting offensive linemen. And their offense didn't really play that good either. It's just the fact that their defense held this Josh Allen-led team to just 16 points. It's really crazy to me that the Steelers' defense was this good. And even, it's really surprising, in my opinion, to not see this being close. So I thought Buffalo would win this by at least 10 points. I honestly think this Pittsburgh defense might be better than it was last year. I know it's way too early to tell, but I do feel like Pittsburgh would decline halfway in part of the season, similar to kind of how they did last year. Looking at this, Cam Hayward led the league in pressures this past week, and Melvin Ingram was third, and T.J. Watt was third. Their defense was just all over the field. Very, very, very impressive performance by the Steelers.
Yeah, and my good friend Matt, who I did the live with, is a huge Steelers fan, and he said his defense has to win the games all the time, and they can never rely on the offense. JuJu Smith-Schuster is not a number 1 wide receiver. He's at least a number 2, at best 3 wide receiver, because when Antonio Brown was in town, he was having breakout seasons. Now, he doesn't take it serious enough, and the Steelers defense is tremendous. Melvin Ingram, TJ, and Casey Hayward, I believe his name is. What's his name?
Cameron Hayward.
Cameron Hayward. So I think that they have a great defense, but their offense is going to shoot themselves in the foot and take away opportunities to win a football game for you. And Ben Roethlisberger looked good, a lot of dinks and dunks, and not a lot of deep throws, but that's what I expected in week 1. Mike Tomlin led team. Defense wins games, defense wins championships, and they have enough discipline to just edge by and win a game. And going forward, I just don't think that JuJu is going to be the number 1 wide receiver. He's too busy playing around with FaZe Clan in Los Angeles in their mansion, rather than taking it serious and putting in the work Devontae Adams does to be a number 1 wide receiver. That's what I have to say about that.
And I've tried to tell people for years and years and years, and I'm not just, saying this because I hate JuJu Smith with a passion. He's the player I hate the most in the NFL. But I'm not just saying this because I don't like him and he plays for the team I hate the most. JuJu Smith is the most overrated wide receiver in the NFL, and it's not even debatable. He's the most overrated player in the league, and it's not even debatable. No doubt. You have not even a number 1 wide receiver. In my opinion, I know this might sound bold, not even a top 20 receiver in the league on these Fortnite commercials and these car commercials, and it just makes no freaking sense. He's not even focused about games with Pittsburgh. He's more focused about, having a gaming channel or a Switch channel, or whatever it may be. And, now you're starting to see, JuJu Smith, for a supposed number 1 wide receiver, sucked last season for a team that passed so much with Roethlisberger. They didn't have a run game, so they had to pass all the time. And JuJu Smith still did not have a good year. He didn't have a good year when Antonio Brown left the year prior. People are starting to realize he is so freaking annoying. I'm glad people are starting to realize how he's easily the most annoying player in the NFL today.
100%. And I said this on my live. I said, hey, why don't you just retire with football? I mean, hey, your head's not in the game. You can go down another avenue and have success, be a gamer or whatever you want to be, entrepreneur, so what? But for you to not take it as serious, and I think he's doing it for the clout, honestly, because he's posting on Snapchat. He's in his uniform. I mean, he's instead of looking for the ball on the field, he's looking for the cameras for him to take pictures of him, to post on his Instagram. I mean, this guy doesn't have a clue, and he's going to get a reality check sooner than later.
He did kind of already get a reality check, though, against Von Bell, last year running that football. That was awesome. That's going to go to the next game here, the Bengals and Vikings. I mean, that Von Bell hit, I don't think I've ever been more excited about a hit than that. I mean, especially with it causing a fumble, and especially with him dancing on the 50-yard line. Like, that really ticked me off for the game, and that's something else he was doing. To really, having a target on his back for you should not be doing this because it's going to catch up to you. And Von Bell exactly did that. In my opinion, probably play of the year last year. Now that's probably a little bit biased, but that was just an awesome hit by Bell. But and the Bengals and Vikings, and the Bengals were up 14 in this game, and it looked to be like this game is going to be over. And then Zach Taylor, who I am not a fan of really much at all. I hope he succeeds with the team this year, but to me, he has to have at least 7 wins to continue coaching in Cincinnati this year. But, goes for it, I believe, on our own 30-yard line on 4th and 1. We don't get it. Minnesota scores the next drive. It's a 7-point game. Really, then our play calling really started to be conservative. It was not going well at all. Minnesota ended up tying the game. We went to overtime, and our rookie kicker, Evan McPherson, made a 33-yard field goal as time expires in overtime. And to me, you look at Burrow, he did not have a ton of passing attempts, but when he played, he was lights out. I believe only 2 or 3 of his incompletions were not drops. Over half of his incompletions throughout that game were drops. Joe Mixon proved why he, really is getting too much. He's getting disrespected too much, in my opinion, having all over 100 yards rushing. Jamar Chase, that really much, all that, hate and all that crap with him dropping in the preseason. That narrative should really just go away that he's going to be a bust. I mean, he had over 100 receiving yards in his first ever game. It's the most receiving yards in a Bengal history for a rookie receiver. He leads the rookies, all rookies right now, in receiving yards with over 100. My main issue with Cincinnati was the offensive line. I really expected this to be a lot better. I mean, we gave up 5 sacks, but I mean, you got to take the good with the bad. We ended up winning. That's the main thing. But the main reason we won was Joe Burrow's. I mean, that was, in my opinion, his new nickname should be Big Balls Burrow, because 4th and inches, play action pass to Uzama. I mean, that takes a ton of balls to do that play by Burrow. Leads the field goal. We ended up winning. Overall, I was really excited we ended up winning this game. I actually had us losing here. It was going to be close. Really glad we're able to pull the victory off here, because this is the first time we're over 500 since, I think, October, November 2018. It's been a couple of years.
Yeah, Joe Burrow looked really good coming off that MCL injury. He was rolling out, avoiding the rush, but both teams' defenses were all over the field. I mean, the quarterback pressure was in their face. I mean, the pass rush was getting through the offensive line, no wall. But, I mean, this is what I expected from Minnesota. They shoot themselves in the foot. I mean, coming from a Packers fan, I was loving every minute of it, just watching them just self-destruct. And I was thanking you in the process. But overall, I mean, for them to come from 21-7 all the way back, but for you guys to secure it with the rookie kicker, I mean, what a beautiful game that was. But in overtime, it's always a thrill when you see your division rivals go down.
And, looking at this game, and in a way, it was kind of like a tale of two halves. The first half, it was more so the Bengals. They weren't leading by a ton. But, you look at the offensive line penalties by the Vikings. They had 9 in the first half. Like, that is insane. You look at the second half, that's when the Bengals blew up their lead and the Vikings were able to tie it. I don't think either of these teams are bad. I said before, I think Minnesota will surprise some people. But, their offensive line play was far worse, in my opinion, than anybody could have imagined. Christian Darrisaw was there that game. Anthony Barr, our star linebacker, was there that game as well. I don't know how that really impacted the performance there. But you really look at the Bengals. I mentioned 5 sacks. I know lots of people are really excited about this one in Cincinnati. But I really feel like, people are not talking about the bad just because we won. 5 sacks is horrible, especially against a Vikings team who, honestly, you look at it, they could have done better, on defense. Joe Burrow did not have a ton of passing attempts. I believe he had less than 30 passing attempts, and he gave up 5 sacks. That is not good at all. Their run offense, I was really impressed with. But this is interesting. I feel like either one of these teams are capable of being around. I feel like the Bengals are capable of being around that 500 type of area. And the Vikings, to me, I was really more disappointed with the Vikings than I was impressed with the Bengals.
Yeah, what do you expect out of Kirk Cousins at this point? That's, in my opinion, the worst signing by a team. Kirk Cousins to me doesn't impress me one bit, and I don't fear him one bit either. When we go up against him, I just hope we do. I hope he's in the lineup, because for me, I'm thinking turnovers, baby, because he's going to force the ball to Adam Thielen. We already know. So you just play man coverage, single high safety over the top, and you're going to pick him most of the times because he looks in Adam Thielen's direction 9 times out of 10. I mean, yes, he does go through his reads, but we know who he's targeting. Come on now. And that's the difference between a quarterback who can utilize all his weapons and a quarterback that can only utilize 1 or 2 of his weapons.
And one more thing, I was really impressed with this Bengals defense going up against Justin Jefferson. I thought Justin Jefferson was going to have a breakout game. Clearly that did not happen. And with Kirk Cousins, it seemed like, the majority of the Bengals sacks were, when, Kirk Cousins was holding the ball in the pocket too long. I really feel like Kirk Cousins, if he just threw the ball away, could have prevented some of these sacks. But nice win for the Bengals. Hopefully, they end up winning the game against Chicago this week. Who knows? I mean, it could be Justin Fields starting. It could be, Andy Dalton starting. That'll be the next topic here, kind of with the Bears and Rams game. This Bears and Rams game, I mean, you really saw the Rams, their first drive. You saw Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay, what you're going to see the majority of the year, passing the ball down people's throats. Matthew Stafford is having some amazing deep ball throws. And, I mean, I really looked at times like the Chicago secondary, was just not even really paying attention. I saw a meme. I looked at the Bears were still in, the 6 feet with the coronavirus because there was nobody even close to some of these Rams receivers. Andy Dalton to me played slightly better than people expected, but still not really good. The Rams ended up winning 34-14. Really, this Rams defense is going to be terrific. Their offense is going to be terrific. And now it's interesting because, the Bears play the Bengals here in week 2, and some people think this is the winnable game for the Bears. In my opinion, I don't think they're going to end up beating Cincinnati. But now the question is, after this performance, I wouldn't say it's horrible. I wouldn't say it's good by any means from Andy Dalton. What should the Bears do with Justin Fields?
I say Bedlam. I've always been a fan of quarterbacks sitting behind a veteran quarterback and learning. And worked out with Patrick Mahomes, worked out with Aaron Rodgers. And Justin Fields respects Andy Dalton and the work that he puts in. And, just for fans to turn their back on Andy week 1 and want Justin Fields in there, I mean, what a shame, guys. I mean, honestly, Andy Dalton's a veteran quarterback. He can go in there. The game is slower for him. He makes better reads than Justin Fields at this point in their careers. And so be it. Andy Dalton's not Aaron Rodgers. What do you want from the guy? I mean, he's a quarterback that can go in and win you a game. Obviously, didn't result in that. But I say you keep Andy Dalton in there until Justin Fields is 100% ready. Mind you, guys, there's 16 more games to go. What's the rush to throw him on? It's not like he's going to, alter the outcome of your season.
And that's my thing as well. I just don't get the obsession with starting Justin Fields. This Bears team is not a playoff team. Like we talked about before, I can maybe see 4 or 5, maybe 6 wins for the Bears this season. And looking at it, And, what do people expect from Andy Dalton? Going into that game, Dalton's going to suck. He didn't play good. They should bench Fields. You said he was going to suck, and he sucked. I just don't get how people expected Dalton to play worse in a way. It just doesn't really make much sense to me. There was no confidence in people saying, Andy Dalton's going to be good, then he performs bad. If you knew he was going to play bad, and he played bad against a top Rams defense, I just don't get it. Andy Dalton is not really good. I would say he's about average. He would be a nice backup for a team. But you're looking at this, it just does not make much sense to me. Justin Fields has shown some promise in the preseason, but once you put Fields in the game for the Bears, there's no turning back. Like, you can't, if Fields has 4 or 5 bad games, you're not going to bench him for Dalton, or you're not going to bench him for Nick Foles. And then at that point, you really just messed up. And Matt Nagy could be fired, and you don't know what's going to happen. Like, if you bench Justin Fields, we've seen this before with different rookie quarterbacks, especially in Cleveland, years ago. They putting these quarterbacks way too early, and, they don't play good. Instead of giving them more opportunities to start and try to get better, then they go back to their veteran quarterback. Like, there is so much at risk for starting Justin Fields in week 2 or week 3. I feel like they should not be rushing this, especially for a quarterback's development who's yet to play start a game in the NFL. He looked good in the limited snaps he played against the Rams, but those are some, designed plays specifically for Fields, not for this offense led by Andy Dalton. Starting Fields would be horrible for Chicago, and, it just did not make much sense to me. Fields has a lot of promise, but if you put him in there under the fire, look at Dwayne Haskins. Everybody thought he was going to be good, and he starts with Washington, and he absolutely sucked. He had that famous interview after he was drafted by Washington. The league done messed up, and then look at him. He's just absolutely sucked. Josh Rosen, for example, he did. I don't think he started week 1 in Arizona. I think it was Sam Bradford, but Rosen eventually came in. But we've seen this time and time and again. You mentioned Mahomes. You mentioned Rodgers. Also, Lamar Jackson, he really set his first half of the season as well. Some of these other quarterbacks have. Mayfield, he set a couple of games, but it just makes so much sense to stay with Dalton. If they put Fields in right now, this could lead to a disaster situation in Chicago.
Yeah, but how about Matthew Stafford? That's the quarterback Sean McVay has been looking for in his system. Can throw bombs down the field. Obviously, Matthew Stafford's not the best at the rollout game and bootlegs, but he can extend the field and he could throw 70, 80 yards down the field. This guy has a rocket of an arm, and those crossing routes are deadly. Cooper Kupp and Woods, what a duo, guys. And not to mention they got weapons on the offensive end. Obviously, Sean McVay is the best play caller in the league, but that's what I expected. I expected the Rams to shut them out because we know what the Bears are. They're mediocre. Okay, they might win a handful of games. You want to give them that at best, but they're not in contention. So I expected everything as it happened.
And with Stafford, to me, I've said it before, and I honestly believe Stafford's probably the most underrated quarterback right now in the NFL. If he played for the Steelers, despite him never having a playoff win, I think there would be a legitimate case that he would be a Hall of Famer. I know it might sound crazy, but with the obsession that the NFL Hall of Fame loves with the Cowboys, Patriots, and Steelers, to me, Stafford would easily get in. Since Stafford's played for a low market team who has not had much success, honestly, probably the worst franchise in NFL history. The Lions, he doesn't get this recognition like he should. He is phenomenal. He's going to do great things with the Rams. And you mentioned this trade with the Rams and the Lions. It goes to the next game here. The San Francisco 49ers going up against the Detroit Lions. The 49ers really had this one in the bag here early on. And then, Dan Campbell, talked about, hitting people's kneecaps and everything, never going to quit. And that's really exactly what the Lions did. I believe they were down 28 at one point in the game, and they made it within one possession. Almost came back and maybe could have tied it. It's crazy because you look at this Lions team. They have Goff, who, in my opinion, is probably not even a top 20 to 25 quarterback in the league. And that's another thing. If Sean McVay and Jared Goff goes to the Super Bowl, Jared Goff, like I just said, is not even a top 20 quarterback. Imagine what Sean McVay is going to do with Matthew Stafford. Like, that is just crazy. But with Jared Goff, they have a tremendous offensive line. I mean, they have DeAndre Swift, in my opinion, is going to be played like a top 10 running back this year. You look at the wide receivers, they really don't have anybody. They lost Marvin Jones and Galladay. Their defense, Okuda's out for the year. They didn't really have anybody special on defense. But the fact that they scored 30 points against this very stout 49ers defense that we've seen in the past was very impressive to me. This Lions team might be slightly better than I originally thought.
Out on Monday, right? Lambeau Field, Monday Night Football prime time. So we'll see how Jared Goff does under the bright lights. I've never feared Jared Goff. Excuse me. Reason being, I think Matthew Stafford is more talented than him, and that has more intangibles than Jared Goff. I mean, their hand sizes, their capabilities to extend the play, to read the field. Look off safeties. I mean, there's so much that goes into it. And Jared Goff is not at the level of Stafford yet, right? And to be honest, when we played Jared Goff, I was salivating just thinking about all the turnovers we can create. Matthew Stafford, I don't fear as much. I didn't fear Jared Goff as much as Matthew Stafford. Here's why. Because Matthew Stafford was handicapped by a terrible team, right? So everything had to go right just for Matthew Stafford to prevail. Jared Goff's situation, I mean, he had a stacked team around him, the best play caller in the league, couldn't get it done, right? So everything had to go wrong for him. It's just like two different situations. They swapped teams, new environments now. So I think Matthew Stafford will have more success. The Rams have won this trade, even though they gave up a lot to get him. But I think the upside is way more with Matthew Stafford than you get with Jared Goff. Because Goff, I mean, middle of the pack quarterback. He reminds me a lot of Rosen, a lot of hype behind him, but can't back it up on the field at the end of the day.
And it's interesting because you look at the Lions and the Rams. I feel like both these teams can win the trade in their own separate ways. As long as the Rams win the Super Bowl, which I think they are capable of, I feel like they've won it in that aspect. But you look at the Lions, they're a team that's rebuilding. It's not going to be really good for the next couple of years. To get multiple draft picks from the Rams, I feel like that could be very beneficial for a team that's rebuilding. Maybe, use those draft picks to put them up in a big, trade to maybe you get a top quarterback or trade up to get more draft picks or something like that. But, another game here, lots of people were surprised by. I had two big upsets. I got them both right, which is weird because my pick'ems, I was horrible this week. I was 8-8, but my major upsets I somehow got both right. The first one, the Cardinals against the Tennessee Titans. To me, I was telling somebody back in June that I thought Kyler Murray could be a dark horse for the MVP, and I've not said that a single time since then. But now I kind of feel stupid because months and months ago I did say it. I've not talked about it since. But, looking at this Kyler Murray, led offense in Arizona with Cliff Kingsbury, DeAndre Hopkins had a great game. Their offensive line was better than people thought. They play absolutely fantastic. Looking at the Tennessee Titans side, I'm not really surprised they played bad. I did my season prediction, and I believe I had them 9-8. I had them losing their first 3 games of the year. Obviously they play Arizona, and then I think their next 2 games are they played the Seahawks and the Colts. And looking at this Titans team, I'm not surprised at all because looking at it here, I mean, they lost JuJu Smith in the offseason, one of the better tight ends in the league. They lost Corey Davis to New York Jets, a pretty nice wide receiver and a nice weapon for Ryan Tannehill last season. They lost Adam Humphries to the Washington football team with former teammate Ryan Fitzpatrick. They lost Adoree Jackson, the starting quarter, to the New York Giants. And they lost their Arthur Smith, their offense coordinator, who is now the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. To me, I kind of said this in my video. I think it'll take a couple of weeks for this Tennessee Titans team, to offense-wise, to kind of get back in their groove. But I was not really surprised at all by this really pathetic performance by Tennessee. But I think, after the week 4 or week 5, something like that, they'll kind of get back in the groove and start playing like Tennessee Titans like they're capable of the past several years.
Yeah, and give credit where credit is due. I definitely think that the Cardinals played a hell of a game in Week 1 going into that. But it's early. Like I keep saying, it's super early. I don't put much emphasis into Week 1 or even halfway through the season. You don't really know a team's moxie or character by Week 8, and I think the Titans are capable, like you said, of playing great football. I like Mike Vrabel. I think he's a great head coach. But DeAndre Hopkins had a good game, and I'm not a fan of Kyler Murray's game personally, for say, because a lot of the fantasy owners love it. That running around, extending the play. But it's going to bite them in the ass sooner or later, and especially when you play against a top tier defense and they catch you slipping, and all of a sudden you have 4 turnovers and that wins the game for them. So I think it's fun in games right now, but once he gets a good licking on him, then Kyler Murray's going to have to adapt and start playing inside the pocket, step up in the pocket rather than running around. You're not Michael Vick, guy. I know you're a great athlete, but hey, it's a different game and you have to evolve with the times. And I'm not a fan of it, but hey, some people are, and I'm not going to hate them for it. Everyone's, has their opinion for that. So I'll leave it at that.
And, I can kind of go in a whole, I don't know if you call it rants but big conversation about how I agree with that to a certain extent, but I'm more so on that with Lamar Jackson than I am Murray, because I'm just not high on Jackson like I am most people are high on Jackson. We'll talk about that later. I just do not get the obsession. Incredible game on Monday Night Football, though. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Next game here was the Seahawks against the Colts. What were your kind of thoughts or initial reaction to this game?
It's everything I expected. Russell Wilson had a few connections to Tyler Lockett. I mean, those guys are money. DK Metcalf was tremendous. Obviously going into this, I didn't expect much from either team, to be honest with you. Especially Indianapolis. I mean, the past couple of years, they've had a rebuild, and it's been tough for them. But I think that Seattle obviously showed that they are the better team. But Russell Wilson's a great quarterback, and every time you have him in the starting lineup, the Seahawks have a chance to win, and they proved that there. But, I was really interested to see how Pete Carroll would come out and how that defense does, because they only have 2 remaining members of that Legion of Boom squad. So it's very interesting to see how they have adapted with the times, and they're still a good football team.
I actually picked the Colts here in this one, and looking at it, I was really surprised at how bad the Colts were. I thought the Colts' offensive line would perform much better than it was. The Colts, for the past several years, have had a top 10 offensive line. Eric Fisher did not play in Sunday's game.
Right.
I feel like that had a major part, why they were so bad. Carson Wentz was okay, nothing great, but I feel like it was kind of
really
not. I wouldn't say he was horrible, but it wasn't great. I feel like it was kind of
mediocre. He was all right. I mean, seeing what I'm shocked he's even on the field after that foot surgery. I mean, this guy is brittle to the bone. I mean, he's made of glass. And, I'm sorry to say it, but I was shocked that he even made it through the game. I was expecting him to get hurt some way through, and see their backup come in like they always have to. And that's what one of the Philadelphia Eagles executives said. We love Carson, but his backup was going in more often than not. So, it's the truth. I mean, you can't stay on the field and stay healthy. What the hell are you doing here? But, I didn't expect Carson Wentz to play great. I mean, I've lost confidence and faith in him. I mean, I've seen enough. I've seen enough of him.
And with Wentz, I didn't expect him to play great. I thought he would be good, but I was disappointed with his performance. And,
yeah.
I mean, you mentioned Wilson. I mean, he was just lights out. I mean, I believe he had 5 incompletions, and he had 4 touchdowns. So he had nearly as many touchdowns as he has incompletions. Just absolutely insane against a usually good Indianapolis defense. Wilson, it seems like it does this every year, though. A great start off of the season, and then as the season goes on, he kind of he drops an MVP ranking each week. But our next game here was the Panthers against the Jets. And to me, you look at this quarterback, Zach Wilson, who I think has potential to be good with the Jets. The Jets offensive line, they lost another, player for quite some time, with Mekhi Becton. He's going to be out for a while. Obviously, they lost Carl Lawson a couple of weeks ago to a season-ending injury. But I feel, we mentioned earlier in the Bengals-Vikings game, I kind of feel like this was a situation with Zach Wilson, a tale of two halves. The first half, he did not play good. The second half, he really picked it up. And looking at this, Jets team, it's interesting because it was a Sam Darnold revenge game, his first game against the Jets. The Panthers offense, to me, scoring just 19 points against the Jets. I thought they could have done much better. But I kind of had mixed feelings towards this first game with Wilson. He had his moments. It was really impressive, but he also had his moments, like obviously rookie mistake that you expect. He's gonna learn. He's not gonna do that again. Overall, I thought Wilson played all right in his debut against Carolina.
Yeah, I think Zach Wilson is one of the most NFL-ready quarterbacks in that class. I mean, he looked confident. He looks like he's ready for the bright lights. He's ready for the pressure. I mean, he plays with some, swagger to him, and I like that about Zach. But, Sam Darnold came out in a revenge tour game against his old team, and he got the job done, period, end of story. But people were more impressed with Mac Jones and Zach Wilson. I see it the other way around. I thought Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson had better showings than, Mac. But, you can't really judge it until you see the entire picture. But going off of that, I think the Jets have found themselves a quarterback in Zach Wilson. I think they have, and I think that they're going to stick with them. And I think he's New York material. I don't think Sam was. I mean, he's a SoCal guy, and, he's not used to the bright lights and stuff like that. I mean, obviously USC and all that, but, it's a different animal in New York, and I think Zach Wilson's ready for that.
Yeah, I feel like this Jets team can be – I don't think they're going to win many games this year, maybe 4 or 5, something like that. But I think they're going to be much more competitive than people think. I wouldn't be surprised if they maybe had an upset win against a team like the Dolphins or something like that. Maybe a quality win against a playoff contender. Kind of speaking of the Dolphins, you mentioned Matt Jones. The Dolphins beat the Patriots here 17-16. What were your kind of thoughts on this one in the first game of Matt Jones?
I mean, Mac Jones played good. 29-39, 281 passing yards, 1 touchdown. Didn't stuff the stat sheet by any means, but played good. I liked how he went through his reads. He didn't fold under pressure. He looks really good in Bill Belichick's system, I'll tell you that. I mean, this is what Bill Belichick's known for doing. Creating a system where a quarterback can be successful, a la Tom Brady. Is he the next Tom Brady? I don't know. But a lot of people are calling him that. So, I'll put some stock into that. But Tua played good. I mean, 16-27, 202 passing yards, 1 touchdown, enough to get it done against the Patriots. I mean, these aren't the same Patriots as a couple years ago. Let's get that right, guys. I mean, they're not even close. But you still have Bill Belichick, who is a mastermind on the defensive and offensive end. And anytime you have him on your sideline calling the plays, you have a chance. But I was impressed with Mac. I think Trevor Lawrence had a better showing. I just think he did. Obviously, that's the eye test and that's the stat sheet. But I wasn't disappointed by Mac. Very clean, efficient game. And I think going forward, he's going to be successful in New England.
Yeah, I was impressed with Matt Jones, but I feel like Jones is one of those players where I don't think people should expect these, amazing numbers from Matt Jones, because I feel like Jones, he might not put up these stats like Zach Wilson's capable of with New York, but I mean, just how smart Matt Jones is. I feel like that's part of the reason that's why he went up so early in the draft. He really should have been drafted earlier, but just his football IQ, his smart decisions, making the right, reads and everything like that. And pairing him with Bill Belichick, I mean, that is going to be phenomenal. I know, there might have been a couple of plays where Jones, wasn't good on Sunday, but I mean, they did lose. I honestly had them beating the Dolphins, but they lost to 1 point against the Dolphins team who had 10 wins last season. who is capable of being in the playoffs last year, capable of being in the playoffs this year. I'm excited to see Jones in New England. I feel like it's going to pan out well, and I feel like the Patriots did the right decision by starting Matt Jones week 1 over Newton. And kind of our next game here with another rookie quarterback. The Texans. I decided to be bold, more so stupid, and have the Texans going 0-17, which I thought, looking at their roster, they won just 4 games with Sean Watson last year. I mean, look at their roster now. It's worse. I thought it was a possibility. They shocked everybody and put up 37 points against the Jacksonville Jaguars. What were your thoughts on this game and Trevor Lawrence's debut?
Well, first off, I've heard a lot of bad things about Urban Myers. Let's get that out there. A lot of veteran players are disgruntled with him. A lot of people in the organization don't want him there. And, we'll see where that goes. But a lot of people said that about John Gruden. Now look at the Raiders, doing damn good. But I think, Tyrod Taylor did good in place of Deshaun. It's what you expect, especially when Deshaun Watson's going through what he is going through. But I love T-Mobile. He's always been one of my favorite quarterbacks to come in. Like I said, this is my favorite saying. He's a veteran quarterback that can come in, move the chains, win you a game. And what did he do? He won the game. And obviously, I didn't expect much from the Jaguars. They've been a train wreck for the past couple of years. I personally think they should have stuck with Gardner Minshew, but they didn't. But they wanted – everyone's obsessed with putting the rookies in. You got to put them in week 1. I don't understand it. Never will. But people were saying, oh, do you see Aaron Rodgers got benched for Jordan Love? Not the case at all. They sat Aaron because it's a garbage game. Nothing he could do to bring him back. So why would you risk the reigning MVP's health? But besides that, overall, I think Houston looked good, but it's a fluke. It's week 1. It's against the Jacksonville Jaguars. What more do you expect? I mean, going forward, I think they're barely 500, if that.
Yeah, this Texans team, to me, I was looking at their schedule. Their most winnable games, the 2 games against Jacksonville and the Jets. Aside from that, I don't see them winning, really barely any games at all. Tyrod Taylor is capable of winning some games, but they don't have a good offensive line. They don't have Brandon Cooks is extremely underrated, but they don't have really many good targets for Taylor to throw to. Their defense, they really don't have any great players in there. But, I agree with what you said. Possible fluke, kind of like how Jacksonville was last year, winning the first and, just losing out. And you mentioned the Packers. That game, that was actually the other game I had my upset pick. I had the Saints winning. Part of the reason I had the Saints winning, and I know it might sound kind of, stupid, but, with this game, not being played in New Orleans, obviously due to the, storms the past couple of weeks, this game was played in Jacksonville. Looking at a team like the Packers, they're not really used to playing in this Florida heat. Looking at their division, they're playing the Vikings, which have a dome. They play in Detroit, they have a dome. They play in Chicago, which half the time they're playing there, it seems like there's snow on the ground. And the same thing could be said for Green Bay. It's always super cold there. So I kind of thought, with looking at the Packers, they're not used to playing in this heat. Looking at the Saints, they play more against the southern, teams in the league, like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Carolina, which is hot there some. I just thought, the Packers would, get upset here and against the New Orleans. I thought Winston and Sean Payton could surprise people this season. I will say I did not expect Winston to play as good as this. It's crazy. 5 passing touchdowns, but under 200 passing yards. That is insane. Lots of people talk about Rodgers, not playing good. Which, he's going to bounce back against Monday Night Football, against the Lions. People are stupid if they don't think he's going to be play better. My main issue was just this Packers defense, giving up 38 points. That's my issue, more so than Rodgers. You have nothing to worry about Rodgers. It's just more so their defense giving up nearly 40 points to Jameis Winston, who everybody makes fun of, these interceptions. But, obviously the Packers are going to bounce back Monday night. This is what, like you said earlier, just a fluke loss for Green Bay going to be in this game.
Where do I begin? So let's start off with Florida, right? why did the Saints choose Florida? Believe it or not, it has to do with Aaron Rodgers' record in Florida. That's the main reason they chose Jacksonville. Aaron Rodgers is known to have career lows in games played in Florida. And I was kind of worried going into it because I have recollection of some games in Jacksonville, Miami, and I was just like, man, is it going to be a repeat of history? And it was. I mean, I don't think it all goes on Aaron Rodgers' shoulder. Of course, when you're the quarterback and reigning league MVP, a lot of the burden goes on you. But this is uncharacteristic. When's the next time you're going to see Aaron Rodgers go 15 to 28, 133 passing yards, 0 touchdowns, and 2 picks? I mean,
never.
He had almost half of the interceptions he had last season in one game. You're never going to see it. And one interception, I believe, was from Marcus Williams when Aaron Rodgers threw it deep to Marquez Valdez-Scantling. And Marcus Williams played sideline to sideline and caught up with the ball. He basically ran the route for Marquez and picked it off. And Rodgers is probably thinking, how the hell did he get cross-field that fast? I mean, that guy's a hell of an athlete. And he was helping on the other side of the field. So that pick, I'm not going on Aaron Rodgers against. There was another pick when he was trying to force it to Devontae, and it got picked, and that's uncharacteristic. He was playing frustrated. They were getting to him. Obviously, Elton Jenkins at the left tackle position. David Bakhtiari's out for 6 to 8 weeks. Rookie center in Myers, so he doesn't have Corey Linsley, who he's familiar with and comfortable with. And, obviously Aaron Jones got shut out. Didn't see him all day. He was nowhere to be found. And obviously Jameis Winston, career game. Who would have guessed? Week 1 against Packers, and 14-20, 148 passing yards, 5 touchdowns. I mean, phenomenal game. And I'm not a hater. When someone else succeeds, I'll give them more credit. Credit is due. But they played good. Aaron Rodgers was getting coverage sacks a lot because he was looking downfield. They're playing man with single high safety help, and that killed him. And I don't know if it was the wide receivers not getting open or they're just playing that good of a defensive game. But Sean Payton's a great coach, and to lose to them, it's respectable. Jameis Winston sat behind Drew Brees for a year, which really paid off, especially after having a 30-interception season. He needed that time off, and he also had eye surgery. So I think Jameis Winston is in the perfect position he can be, and it fell into place. I mean, in what situation do you see a guy sit behind a future Hall of Famer and then the next year get the start? I mean, you rarely see that. And, from my perspective, I think that the Saints played great. And, especially coming off of the hurricane, man, Ida, I mean, they had to transport families and dogs, and, they were having team bonding with family members and getting to know one another. So I think that really brought them together. I mean, those are things behind the scenes we don't see. And I think overall it paid off for them. And, kudos to them. And, I think the Packers defense needs major reconstruction, especially under new defensive coordinator Joe Barry. He's a Matt LaFleur guy. Matt LaFleur wanted him. He kept Mike Pettin from the Mike McCarthy staff, let him go. So, hey, I got a question for you, Matt LaFleur. You got your guy. Now there's no excuse, okay? You got him. Now put up or shut up, because I'm sick and tired of them saying, oh, well, we need to make this coaching staff change, or, oh, well, let's release Aaron Rodgers' favorite wide receiver, Jake Kumaro, or, screw Cobb, or, all these guys that I expected to make an impact didn't. And, Randall Cobb, his first completion in the game came from Jordan Love. Who would have guessed? It's a reunion with Aaron Rodgers, and Jordan Love's completing the pass to him. There were so many things in this game I had a bone to pick with, and I'm going to go on to say one last thing to everyone who's been posting that Aaron Rodgers got benched for Jordan Love. That is complete bull. That never happened. It's garbage time. Are you going to risk reigning league MVP's health for garbage time? I don't think so. Jordan Love, you're lucky you're the backup, because last year Tim Boyle beat you out, and I have a bone to pick with Jordan Love. I'm not a fan of his. I respect him, and I don't root against him, but for them to draft him without acknowledging Aaron Rodgers, I'm still upset about it. I'm sure Aaron Rodgers still is, and I'm sure that has tainted the Packers play because, you got to remember Aaron Rodgers held out. So he didn't. How many snaps did he get with the starting O and, going into the season? And, from my perspective, it's still early. And, I think the Packers are going to win the North, point blank, period.
And, looking at this game, you mentioned Winston, how important it was sitting behind a guy like Drew Brees. I've said this before, and I will continue to say it forever. 5 to 10 years from now, we're going to look back. 2019, Jameis Winston. I know he had 30 interceptions, but he also had 30 passing touchdowns, over 5,000 yards. Will be one of the most underrated performances of a quarterback in NFL history. 5,000 yards, 30 touchdowns with a brand new head coach, a brand new offense coordinator with, Bruce Arians and Byron Leftwich. You're looking at his interceptions. 13 of his 30 interceptions were drops. Like, that is pretty crazy how much that is. Jameis Winston, to me, sitting behind Brees is so beneficial. Even a guy with, head coach Sean Payton, really offensive-minded guy, for Winston, I feel like obviously the Saints are going to take at least a somewhat step back, because they lost to quite a few players like Trey Hendrickson and Malcolm Brown, some key contributors from their defense last season. Michael Thomas is going to be out for a while, but I do not think the Saints team will be quite as bad as what people think. Obviously, I wouldn't be surprised if the Saints team maybe ended around 500 or so. The Packers, they're still going to be one of the better teams in the league. Expect them to humiliate the Lions on Monday. It is not even going to be close. Obviously, you're going to have the Packers winning regardless in Detroit. But with them having a pathetic performance against the Saints, they're going to have so much, revenge trying to, make up for that performance in week 1. That is going to be a blowout game with the Lions and the Packers on Monday night. And another game here really kind of surprised me was the Denver Broncos and the New York Giants. You look at the Broncos team, I think they have one of the most underrated rosters in the league easily. Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, Noah Fant, KJ Hamler, Javonte Williams. They have the pieces there. They just need to find their consistent quarterback. Look at their defense. They have Von Miller. He's not what he used to be, but he's still pretty decent. Justin Simmons, one of the best safeties in the league. Bradley Chubb. And, they're going up against a Giants team who lots of people maybe think that they're capable of being in the playoffs. But to have Daniel Jones as a quarterback, which Daniel Jones as your quarterback, you're not a playoff contender in my opinion. He has turnovers constantly. You have these weapons around you. Your defense isn't bad. Your offensive line is improved. Saquon Barkley is back from a season-ending injury last season, and you're only able to put up 13 points against a Denver team, which, like I said, have a couple of nice players, but aside from that, they have nobody aside from those 3 guys like I mentioned that are really. They have Fuller, but I feel like the New York Giants are definitely capable of putting up more than 13 points against this Denver team. Denver really surprised me how good they were with Teddy Bridgewater, and the Giants really disappointed me in how just not good they were with Daniel Jones as their starting quarterback.
Yeah, and not to mention, a touchdown came in garbage time. It was a touchdown run by Daniel Jones inside the goal line there. But Teddy Bridgewater, I got to give credit to him. A couple years ago, almost lost his leg, almost got amputated because of a non-contact injury. So just to see how far he's come, from Minnesota to Carolina now, God, I couldn't imagine almost losing your leg and still stepping onto that field. Same with Alex Smith, almost lost his leg. So much credit to those guys. But I think that he played great, and I think he's a better quarterback than Drew Lock, 100%. Teddy Bridgewater is miles ahead of him. But Daniel Jones disappointed me, and so did Saquon. I expected more, and obviously the one garbage time touchdown doesn't count. So if you really look at it, they got obliterated by 3 or 4 scores. They made it close at the end, but, obviously, I think that Denver would be in a much different position if they landed Rodgers in the offseason, trading Bradley Chubb and Drew Lock to the Packers. But they still got the dub, and, it's a tight division they got. And good luck with Kansas City, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I'm really, really surprised just how good Denver was, how bad the Giants were. Hopefully, I mean, I expect the Giants to be better, but if not, if they don't get at least 8 wins, go ahead and use one of those, first round picks and get your quarterback next year. They have 2 next year for a reason. I feel like they specifically did that to have draft capital to maybe get a guy like Spencer Rattler or Sam Howell from UNC. But kind of one of the last games here. Let's see here. Yeah, the last game, the incredible Monday Night Football game. Like I don't think there's going to be a better Monday Night Football game than we saw Monday. You have the Ravens, and I always say the Ravens, if they are up 10 points, the game is over. If they are down 10 points, the game is over. The Ravens offense is specifically made to be winning and being ahead by a large margin. They are not one of those teams who can come back from behind. When Lamar Jackson is a starting quarterback for the Ravens, they are 0-6, I believe, when they are down 10 plus points. When Lamar Jackson is the quarterback from the Ravens heading into Monday Night Football, I tell everybody this all the time, and it's one of the reasons why I don't believe the Ravens will end up winning a Super Bowl with Jackson, because they have to be ahead. If they're not ahead, they're not going to win. When Lamar Jackson is a starting quarterback for the Ravens heading into Monday Night Football, they were 27-1, went up 10 points or more. And Monday Night Football, they were actually up 10 points. That was only the second time they've blown a 10-point lead with Lamar Jackson. This team, to me, is so overrated. I definitely think they're still a playoff contender, but they are not even contenders to win their own division in the AFC North. This is clearly the Browns taking. It is not even debatable, in my opinion. Look at this Ravens offensive line. Absolutely atrocious. You traded Orlando Brown to a team you are competing with to represent the AFC in the Super Bowl with the Kansas City Chiefs. It was really questionable decision when you traded him, but now after you've done it, it was a horrible decision. I mean, looking back, it was much worse than people think now. You have Villanueva, who, was really struggled with Pittsburgh the last couple of seasons, absolutely sucked Monday Night Football. Carl Nassib and, some of these other guys as well. Max Crosby, both of these guys were going in there and getting sacks and everything. And, I mean, this offensive line is much worse than people think. Lamar Jackson, I didn't see anything that really blew me away with him throwing the football. All of his passes, as I expected, were just wide open passes. He did have one good throw. I do not know who was to. He had that 40-yard pass or so, really great deep ball, I believe in the fourth quarter. That was a great throw. Aside from that, I was nothing really to wow about Lamar Jackson. This Ravens team is not nearly as good as people think. I don't think this is an overreaction, because part of me already kind of thought about it heading into the year, especially with all these injuries with Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins. I don't think it's a guarantee this Ravens team's even in the playoffs. Like, I'm not high on them at all.
Especially with the injuries to running back. And, they've been playing mix and match. Brought in Latavius Murray, who just got cut. He refused a pay cut from the Saints. Good for him. Get your bag. But then again, they signed Le'Veon Bell to the practice squad. So, ball handling is a area that they need to work on going forward, but I don't buy much stock into the Ravens. Obviously, Lamar Jackson, 19 of 30, 235 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 12 carries, 86 rushing yards. I mean, it's good for the stats, right? But at the end of the day, we count wins and losses, not stats. So obviously, this was a strange game. At the very end, the Raiders stormed the field. They thought they won. His knee was down inside the goal line, so they run it back. Derek Carr not successful on the quarterback sneak. And overall, I just thought, wow, what a weird game. We were just about to clinch the game, and then all of a sudden, boom, the Ravens have a chance, and then overtime. And, that's a way to kick off Allegiant Stadium. Unfortunately, I wasn't there. I do live in Las Vegas, but, my family has season tickets, so they went. I'm not one of those people that's trying to take advantage of someone else's ticket. So let them enjoy. I sat at home, watched the game, and it was tremendous. One thing I don't like about going to stadiums is having to get up and go to the bathroom. That's terrible, man. And, I don't want to deal with all that shit. But overall, Derek Carr impressive. 34 out of 56, 435 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. And, a big key part of that was Carl Nassib He sacked Lamar Jackson, forcing a fumble recovered by Darius Philon, and that sealed the deal. And I don't know if that has to do with lack of, interest by Lamar or ball security or whatever it is. But at the end of the day, just sloppy play. I mean, they were up 10 and blew it. So I think John Gruden got lucky because he's been on the hot seat for a while. But overall, very impressive win by the Raiders. I support the Raiders. I'm not a Raiders fan. Don't get it twisted here. But I do support my local teams in Vegas. But wow, what a game.
Did you say 435 passing yards for Carr?
If I'm not mistaken, that's what he had.
That is crazy because look at the first quarter. Carr sucked the first quarter. He was targeting Darren Waller, target after target after target. Carr really didn't get going until, honestly, to me, the third quarter. So the fact that he had that many passing yards is very impressive. And it's interesting because you look at this game. This is not one of those typical games that the Ravens would lose. Like I mentioned, they were 27-1, went up 10 with Jackson. And with the Ravens, their stout defense, there's been times the past couple of years where their defense has carried them in games and helped them win, but the offense hasn't really got going. And so they're not really used to losing in this typical fashion to a team on paper and roster-wise. They are better than the Raiders. Looking at the Raiders, they are actually kind of used to winning these type of games because they are one of the most inconsistent teams in the NFL. I say it pretty much every single time I talk about the Raiders. I mean, for example, the Raiders beat the Chiefs last season, and I think it was Sunday Night Football. They nearly beat them again last year. So they were super close to sweeping the Chiefs somehow last year, which really goes unnoticed and goes to show how inconsistent this Raiders team is. Last season, the Raiders started off 5-3. I believe they finished 8-8. Like the Raiders are so inconsistent, and they're capable of beating these teams like the Ravens. But the very next week, they're capable of losing to a team like the Lions, the Texans, or the Jets. But I was impressed with Carr. With Darren Waller, obviously one of the best tight ends in the league. And it's interesting because the Raiders just had enough to contain Jackson, with this, Ravens rush offense. If you start to run against Baltimore, you're going to win. You have to let Lamar Jackson throw. If you let Jackson throw, there's a good chance you're going to win. That's exactly what the Raiders did Monday night. And it's interesting. I was talking to somebody I know who's a big Raiders fan. The Raiders have never had a top 25 defense since Derek Carr has been the quarterback for the Raiders. That is absolutely crazy. And the fact he actually leaves quarterbacks, I believe, and fourth quarter comebacks since 2018. And, he does not have a ton of weapons. He has Darren Waller, but to say he has some star players, and he really doesn't.
He's good.
Well, I mean, more so, in the past, not including this year, in the past couple of years.
Right.
But this Raiders team is very interesting. This is one of those games you don't really expect them to win. I kind of said on a video, this Raiders team is interesting because I could see them at 6 wins, but I could also see them at 9 wins. I think they're a dark horse for a possible playoff contention spot.
Yeah, there's going to be a few games that determine their season by a field goal. You watch. There's going to be a few games where it's going to be late, a couple second field goal that's going to win them the game. But here's an interesting stat. So in the 3 years that John Gruden's been with the Raiders, right, for a second stint, the Raiders have had, I believe, 66 sacks, league low for John Gruden, and not to mention most points per game allowed, 28.5 points per game. I mean, that's unbelievable. So the past 3 years, the defense has been atrocious under Gruden. Now, I don't know if that's because he's an offensive-minded quarterback and has neglected the defensive side of football, but I will say this, he needs to turn it around because defense wins games, defense wins championships, period, end of story.
And that really kind of showed last year. The Raiders, towards the end of the season, their defense was just so bad. I mean, they fired Paul Gunther on a short week. I believe they played Thursday Night Football, and they fired him on the Monday. They were that desperate. They wanted to improve on their defense, so they bring in some new interim defense coordinator who only has 3 days to prepare. I'm really interested with the Raiders this year. There was lots of surprises, lots of players you not expect to play good would play good. Lots of really dud performances by people. Lots of surprise upsets, lots of surprise wins. So what were some of your biggest surprises here in week 1?
Definitely my Packers. I had Aaron Rodgers coming in, throwing 4 touchdowns, no picks, over 300 passing yards, because I thought he would just shred the Saints defense, especially with what's going on with the Saints not having a home. Nothing personal against that. I mean, it's terrible, a natural disaster, God forbid. And, I'm praying for everyone down in New Orleans. But, just off the circumstances, I expected my Packers to come in there and steamroll them, and it just didn't happen. And there's a lot of factors, like I said, and you really can't pinpoint one person who's at fault. And Matt LaFleur called it embarrassing. It was, but you can use different terms. You don't have to say your quarterback's embarrassing. Come on, guy. He's the league MVP. Anyways, besides that, I think my biggest surprise, other than the Packers, obviously, I look at some games here. I was shocked at the Steelers, Bills, Eagles. I expected, so it wasn't too shocking there. But I was kind of impressed with the kickoff of the NFL season with the Dallas Cowboys and Buccaneers. That was a hell of a game, and so was the Raiders too. So it was jam-packed week 1, man. I mean, action-packed, man. I mean, you couldn't miss it. And if you did miss it, please go and watch the highlights, because they're tremendous. I mean, I was sitting here all morning just watching reruns. Even though I watched the games in full, I just had to go watch it back because, I miss NFL football. And, for us to have it back, especially with last year, no crowd, it's back at full force, full strength, back when we were strong. And, I'm ready for this season. I'm really excited to see who comes out on top of the NFC and AFC.
And, you mentioned the Cowboys with Prescott. That was definitely one of my biggest takeaways, because I was concerned with Prescott, how he was going to perform against not a good defense, but a great defense in Tampa Bay, his first game back from his horrific injury last year. And, I mean, I feel like he exceeded everybody's expectations, nearly winning a game against Tampa Bay. If it wasn't for the kicking issues, they would have won that game. Some of the play calling was kind of questionable for Dallas, and Prescott was still able to manage nearly 30 points against a stout Tampa Bay defense. Another one, like I mentioned earlier, I hate to say it, was that just impressive one with Pittsburgh against Buffalo. I mean, holding the Buffalo Bills to just 16 points is very impressive. 3 of their players were in the top 3 in quarterback pressures this past week. Really impressed with that game to me. The Steelers are one of those teams I think are a little bit overrated. I wouldn't be surprised to start off hot, but as the season continues, kind of decline to play like last year. Despite me picking the Saints to defeat the Packers, I was just surprised in how large a margin that victory was. I know obviously nobody expected Aaron Rodgers to play that bad. That's one of those once in a lifetime bad historical, once in a lifetime bad games by Rodgers you're never going to see again. Winston, 5 touchdowns, but less than 200 yards. That's really kind of crazy. And, those are kind of my surprises for the week. There's lots of intriguing games to watch out for week 2 this week. And week 2 is actually of the New York Giants taking on the Washington football team. And, with this game, obviously Tyler Heineke will be starting in place of Ryan Fitzpatrick. Like we mentioned earlier, Fitzpatrick is out 6 to 8 weeks with a hip injury. So who do you have winning this one between the Washington football team and the New York Giants? You're on mute.
I apologize for that, but I have to go with the Giants. Daniel Jones has been in that organization for a couple of years now. Saquon Barkley is a top 3, top 5 running back when healthy. They got Sterling Shepard. They got weapons on the offense, and hopefully their defense can hold the Washington football team to under double digits and get the win. But I don't expect much from Taylor Heineke. I think that he's going to come in, have a high turnover rate game, and the team that has the most turnovers wins. So that will be the New York football Giants here. But I don't buy much stock into Washington, because even with Ryan Fitzpatrick, he's a middle-of-the-pack quarterback. he could win a couple of games for you, but he's not going to take you to the playoffs or the championship game. He's going to win you here, one game there, lose you a couple. But at the end of the day, I think shall Taylor Heineke go down in flames? first call you make is to Cam Newton. Here's why. Like we've been saying, the connection with Ron Rivera is linked for 9+ years, and I think that he fits in that system with the RPO. And not to mention, they don't have a bad defense. They have some guys, Kerrigan and the boys, that can hold it down on the front. And I think that overall, who knows, if Cam Newton joins them, they could go on a late winning streak.
This game's really interesting to me because, earlier when I made my predictions, I had Washington, I believe, winning this game. But it's one of those situations where, heading into the year, I didn't think Washington was, all that compared to other people. I really didn't think they were a playoff team, even with Fitzpatrick as their quarterback. Like I mentioned with Heineke earlier, I feel like he has, potential we haven't seen yet, and that can be good, but that can be bad. We don't really know what to expect from him at Washington. We saw that one amazing performance in postseason against Tampa Bay. But, Ryan Fitzpatrick was starting here week 2 against the Giants. You know what you're going to get, but it's still pretty much a question mark with Fitzpatrick, with he's super inconsistent. But, with the 6 to 8 weeks that Taylor Heineke or maybe Cam Newton, like we've been mentioning, will be starting for the Washington football team, it's interesting because, with Curtis Samuel, he's going to be out for a couple of weeks. This Washington defense is capable of winning games and taking over games, even if the quarterback plays bad. We've seen that last year when Alex Smith was their quarterback at times. But it's interesting because, Daniel Jones, he's one of the most inconsistent quarterbacks in the league. He's just like Ryan Fitzpatrick. Going up against this stout Washington defensive line, this is really a toss-up to me because really, looking at it, this was probably one of the biggest toss-ups, in my opinion, in the Week 2 matchups. I do not trust Daniel Jones. I don't really trust Taylor Heineke yet. He's played one game. I want to take Daniel Jones here and the Giants because, they're more proven, I guess. They've been in the league longer. They're more experienced. They have better weapons. I would take the Giants here. But I wouldn't be surprised if Washington would maybe pull off an upset victory here against the New York Giants. I think you're on mute. No.
Gotcha. But yeah, I think obviously New York Giants coming out with that win. But going into some WWE, I heard you had some topics to talk about.
Yeah, it's kind of the last topic, for today. And, Monday was very interesting. All over wrestling Twitter, Big E, a member of the New Day to kind of make him, on a solo run, tweeted that he was going to cash in the Money in the Bank on Monday Night Raw and win the title. There's lots of people, saying, oh, that's just pretty much BS. They're just winning ratings because, with all the recent AEW signings and their really impressive, ratings on AEW Dynamite. And with Monday Night Football coming back, the first Monday Night Football in quite some time, Monday Night Raw's ratings are at an all-time low, and that's without Monday Night Football on for the past, pretty much the whole year. Nobody really expected, in my opinion, Big E to actually do it. I think this was just like a ratings draw. And, Bobby Lashley took on Randy Orton in a championship match, which is interesting. I believe this match was actually scheduled for one of their next pay-per-views. But they pushed it up to Monday Night Raw. And to me, the stupidest thing about this, Bobby Lashley and Randy Orton, Lashley's been a champion for quite some time. They've made him look like Brock Lesnar, I believe, in 2014, where all of his matches are like 2 or 3 minutes, like squash matches, making him look stronger when the matches are shorter. And, Lashley defeats Randy Orton to retain the title, and Big E comes in, cashes in the Money in the Bank, and actually defeats Bobby Lashley. First of all, Money in the Bank is not supposed to be like, oh, I'm going to cash in tonight, tell all the fans about it, and he actually does it. Money in the Bank is purposely supposed to be a shocking moment for wrestling fans and, a possible new title, new person who's carried a title in the WWE. You do not talk about this on TV. To me, this really shows how desperate WWE is for the ratings right now. And something else that really makes no sense to me, they've been building up Bobby Lashley for months and months and months. And with these squash matches, he defeated Goldberg at SummerSlam. And Goldberg, he's known for short matches and wins. Lashley absolutely humiliated Goldberg in his match at SummerSlam. So you think, oh, Lashley's not going to give up the title anytime soon. Instead of Big E cashing in the Money in the Bank during the Randy Orton and Bobby Lashley match and pinning Orton, which would make so much more sense because he's not as high as Bobby Lashley is right now. Bobby Lashley is the top guy on Monday Night Raw easily because he's been a champion for quite some time. Instead of pinning Orton, which it would make so much more sense because you're not building down or taking down Bobby Lashley's title. You're pinning Orton instead of Lashley to set up a possible feud for Lashley and Big E. Once that match finishes, Big E comes out and pins Lashley. To me, that makes no sense. You should not be pinning Lashley. You should be pinning Orton because you have now took all of Bobby Lashley's momentum and completely shut down. It should have been Randy Orton who was pinned, and now I saw something. There's a chance it's going to be Bobby Lashley against Goldberg at the Greatest Royal Rumble, whatever you want to call it, in Saudi Arabia. So you look at the ratings aspect. That really proves how desperate they are. Big E, telling he's going to do it, and he does. The poor booking of him pinning Lashley and not Randy Orton, and going to supposedly have Bobby Lashley against Goldberg in Saudi Arabia, a huge money-making situation for Vince McMahon in the WWE. And then lots of people say, oh, this was an amazing episode of Monday Night Raw. It just doesn't make any sense. The poor booking decision of WWE has what led people stop watching WWE and maybe go on to watch AEW or New Japan, or maybe just quit watching wrestling in general. These booking decisions are why people like you and me, we've mentioned before, we don't really watch WWE much like we used to, have quit watching this. This makes absolutely no sense at all. I do not like it at all. It just doesn't really make much sense to me. I think you're on mute.
I do apologize for that. So it goes to show the poor booking, not only on the WWE's part, but Vince McMahon. And he's been known to change the script for Monday Night Raw 30 minutes before the show or even during the show. So it doesn't shock me to see this because he probably saw it gaining steam on social media and he ran with it. And unfortunately, social media does play a different part than it used to. Like when Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock were performing, they didn't have social media to connect with people like that. Come on. So for someone to leak that, it was very rare back in the day. You had to heard it from the horse's mouth. And now someone can type something and people pick up and run with it. Now, I'm not a fan of it because it goes to show that they cannot do long-term storylines. They only think about the now. And that's Vince McMahon's biggest downfall. That's why he'll be forced to sell WWE in the next couple of years because, unfortunately, they haven't put their money where their mouth is. The big deal with Peacock. And they have failed the WWE fan base. And I wasn't a fan of what they did with Cena. Wasn't a fan with Lesnar. And I just don't understand where they're going with the roster. It just seems like they don't know what to do. Like, they don't have a clue. And, I want to send my condolences or my best wishes, to Triple H. Hunter just had a cardiac event, and he is recovering, expected full recovery. But it goes to show maybe there's some things behind the scenes that we're not seeing that those extra additives of stress are getting to him.
And, we kind of talked about that before the show, and it's interesting because Big E tweeted, "Let the cat out of the bag. I intend on cashing my Money in the Bank contract tonight and cashing in to be champion." I don't get why you would spoil that.
No.
Because, that really proves how desperate they are for ratings right now since it's at an all-time low. If you're getting 1.6 or 1.7 without Monday Night Football and with AEW just now getting guys like Adam Cole and Daniel Bryanson, this was really, really poor booking by WWE. I do not think they possibly could have done this any worse possible way.
Yeah, and it's not the same WWE that we used to know, especially going into the PG era when they were on, they were on a different trajectory than the company used to be, less violence, less gore, more PG friendly. But I think that's where AEW is getting their competition, because they are taking away a lot of WWE fan base because they brought back the gore. They are more violent. They are bringing back familiar faces. Big Show, Daniel Bryan, CM Punk, Mark Henry, big names, Cody Rhodes, Jericho, even though he's retiring. Big names they got into the building. And my God, I mean, they're competing with the WWE. Who would have ever thought TNA Wrestling didn't have a chance? I mean, they had the old guys, Booker, Scott Steiner, Nash, Kurt Angle. They didn't have what the AEW roster has now. And to see what they have done and what their president has done, it's amazing. And I actually root for them more than the WWE, because the WWE is a cash cow. Merchandise, that's what they sell, merchandise. They don't sell quality performances anymore. Those days are over. They cannot write a storyline to save their lives. And it's a shame, because they should have storylines that go for months, not just a Raw or a week or two. You know, what happened to the creative side of WWE?
And it's interesting because you mentioned, wrestling with WWE. They don't even refer themselves as wrestling. They refer themselves as sports entertainers. If you watch, Raw, Adam Cole will say sports entertainment or something like that instead of wrestling. And, matches instead of wrestling matches and, stuff like that. But, AEW has a huge episode of AEW Dynamite in a couple weeks at Arthur Ashe Stadium. And there's supposed to be some rumors somebody might appear there. Bray Wyatt's a free agent soon.
Yeah.
I was doing a recording with somebody, and I got an alert on my phone. Kevin Owens is a free agent in January, and it was announced, I believe, 2 or 3 days ago. Sami Zayn's a free agent, I believe, in January. If Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn go to AEW, if Bray Wyatt does, they have more top talent than WWE has. And I really don't think that's even debatable, because look at these guys. You take away Orton, who at times is a part-timer, Reigns, Rollins. Aside from that, you're kind of 3 big guys. You have Lashley, who you just basically thrown away after the Big E situation. Yeah. You have McIntyre, but AEW, you have Omega, Moxley, the Young Bucks. I mean, Jericho, I know he's probably going to retire soon, but you have these more older guys like you've mentioned. Adam Cole, Daniel Bryan, CM Punk. It is crazy. I don't think anybody possibly could have imagined that AEW would actually be this successful and get this many, wrestlers. And I mean, by the time it's over, probably even more. I think you're on mute.
Absolutely. But bear with me one moment. I do have a call. I'll be right back on the mic. But I definitely wanted to ask you, where do you think that the WWE is going to go moving forward?
It's interesting because, I mean, we saw the whole situation with, the Peacock deal, and I don't get how they could have possibly gotten that much money for Peacock. And I really feel like that's kind of the first step. You look at the WWE network on Peacock now. For instance, look at Steve Austin. He'll go up in, the corner of the ring and, stand, and he'll, have 2 middle fingers in the air. The Attitude Era, much, much, much more edgier than it is in today's wrestling. And you look at it, now if you watch the WWE Network on Peacock, they'll blur the middle fingers. They'll blur the basic, really cussing and stuff like you would see in the Attitude Era and stuff. So I feel like that's just the first sign of WWE pretty much basically selling their company in a way. You look at Peacock, they're censoring some of the stuff and really good stuff WWE had back in the, mid 90s and early 2000s and everything. And they're censoring that. And WWE just doesn't really care. They're just in it for the money at this point. I would say give it 5 years. I mean, maybe even less than that. But within 5 years, I honestly believe WWE will sell their company to Disney. I just really think I think it makes so much sense. Because, I mean, you look at Disney. Disney's basically buying everything at this point. And I think you were even on my show when we kind of talked about it. Look at, Disney bought Star Wars from George Lucas. And look how much they've changed that, and the fact that, it is so much different than it was, in the early 2000s and the 80s and everything. and not really for the better. If Disney buys WWE, I mean, it's going to be so babyish and kiddyish at that point. I mean, if that ever happens, it's AEW for the taking, and they're going to be the next top wrestling company, in my opinion.
100%. And who's to say that the WWE can't really, quote unquote, go out of business? I mean, Disney could buy it and change it into whatever they want, and that's kind of what we referred to in regards to Star Wars. I mean, they have changed the script, and George Lucas says this is not what I envisioned, and unfortunately, he signed the deal, so nothing you can do about it. And I think at this point of Vince McMahon's life, I think he is content with that because he doesn't put effort into it. He just kind of plays it by ear, and we'll see about it. I mean, he's not involved in the daily operations like I would like him to be, and Stephanie and Hunter are having a hard time on their end because with Vince, I mean, it just seems like he's out of it. I mean, he's shot, like he's done. And I think that the best move is to sell it, even if it is to Disney. I mean, so be it. Just I want to change the scenery, and what they're putting out now is kind of an embarrassment. You got some guys that have been loyal to that company. R-Truth, Rey Mysterio, Kofi Kingston. I mean, what happens to those guys?
Well, you bring up, Kofi Kingston. I honestly, if there's a situation like that, like if some of these guys like Kofi and Xavier and Big E, want to leave WWE, I 100% would expect them to sign with AEW. Xavier Woods is good friends with Kenny Omega. Both those guys are big into like video games and stuff like that. They've actually, done it was several years ago. Xavier Woods was a part of a big gaming event that I don't remember where it was at, but they even WWE, I believe it was on their app or maybe website, even mentioned Kenny Omega, on that. So they're both really good friends. I wouldn't be surprised if this is only if WWE pretty much just is done and goes to Disney. But looking at this WWE deal with Peacock, it's for 5 years and it's worth more than $1 billion. I mean, that is just absolutely crazy. And goes to show, you can. There's a certain extent, there's a certain point to where money comes in the factor. Like you love what you've done throughout the years, but I mean with that much money for just 5 years, I mean that's kind of stupid not to do it. And I mean if that's 5 years just having the WWE network on Peacock for $1 billion, imagine what Disney could offer when Disney is getting millions and millions of dollars each day with their Disney parks and their sales online and all those other stuff. Disney has pretty much more money than any other possible company. So I just feel like if a company ever does this type of situation, if a company would be willing to buy WWE, Disney's the only one that really makes any sense.
Especially, they would feature it on Disney Plus and probably do some not so favorable things to our beloved WWE. And, like you said, they're blurring or trying to hide the fact of blood or gore from the early 2000s. You go on YouTube, right? And you'll type in, whatever match you want, Undertaker versus Kane, right? And the blood is blurred. I mean, they blur it. I mean, come on, guys. I mean, how PG, how watered down can you get? I mean, we all know it's fake. It's not real. I mean, maybe to little kids that don't know it's scripted. But once you find out it's scripted, you kind of have an idea. Okay, this is, it's not MMA. Trust me, I watch MMA. Nothing close. So I don't understand why they're blurring it. And when kids are watching the UFC and seeing limbs go other ways and guys getting their faces beat in, and what are you censoring? I understand. We live in the cancel era, but I mean, come on, guys. You don't have to do that. That's a little too much. I think it's a little extra.
And something else, you think about it, if WWE would get sold to Disney, I mean, some of these wrestlers might have, in their new contracts, they might have to have so many appearances. I know it might sound crazy, or maybe like a commercial or TV show or something like that. Because think about it, Disney would be even profiting more. Let's say you have a guy like Roman Reigns, and he appears on, I mean, I don't really know any Disney shows now, but like, okay, just exactly a movie. But at the same time, I mean, that could really benefit them because, Roman Reigns eventually, once he's done with WWE, it's going to be probably a movie star like Cena's kind of becoming, and The Rock has been for the past decade. When you have stuff like that, that's only going to get more, viewership and more buys of your movie or ratings of your TV show, whatever it may be. I really feel like it makes a lot more sense than people think. I really feel like it's more realistic than people think. It's possible, and it's crazy to show this decline of the WWE the past several years. This really, kind of about, the other for this episode, we talked about a lot of stuff. Pretty much the week 1 recap, talking about the, rookie starting quarterbacks in week 1, the Bengals beating the Vikings, an impressive win. The Packers, their performance against the Saints, but, the bounce back against the Detroit Lions. Should the Chicago Bears start Justin Fields to week 2? The biggest surprises in week 1, the kind of a little recap preview of the Washington football team taking on the New York Giants. Big E cashing in the Money in the Bank and winning the title. That makes absolutely no sense. And the future of the WWE. So, Tony, can you kind of tell some of the listeners we can follow you on social media?
100%. So my YouTube is Tony G TV. Like I said, I do sports videos, but I've been branching out in politics, etc. My sports Instagram page is Tony Gazza TV, and my personal on IG is Antonio W Gazza. No TikTok, don't use Twitter, don't use Facebook. So find me on those platforms. I want to thank Jordan for having me on. As always, I know I'm welcome, and you are also welcome on my show. I'm gonna have you on. I haven't been doing like collaborative episodes as of late, but I'll definitely have you on Instagram Live or even a live stream on StreamYard. But thank you, my friend.
I'll definitely put the links in the description below so people can follow you. We'll definitely, have to check on that. Maybe join. I join your show or something. Thank you all so much for watching. If you like this video and subscribe to the channel, I would greatly appreciate it. We'll see you all next time on the Sports 2 Hines Show.